That chair is good enough for a name that does not exist in our records. Lieutenant Jason Cole did not whisper it. His voice carried beneath the ceremony pavilion, across the polished concrete, and into the shaded rows reserved for generals, donors, and decorated veterans. Several guests turned. None of them spoke. Walter Brennan stood beside a metal folding chair placed behind a thick speaker column. From there, he could see half the stage, one corner of the covered memorial, and almost nothing else. At 84, Walter had learned that public humiliation rarely needed shouting. Sometimes it arrived in a pressed uniform, holding a clipboard. Emily Foster, the civilian coordinator, kept one hand on the chair. "I am sorry, Mr. Brennan," she said. "Lieutenant Cole says the reserved section is full." Walter looked down at the invitation in his weathered hand. Heavy cream paper, gold border, the seal of Fort Halstead at the top. Beneath it were 4 words. Founding members, reserved. His name appeared below. Walter J. Brennan. No rank. No unit number. No explanation. Cole took the invitation and examined it again. "The archive office probably generated it from an incomplete mailing list," he said. "The front section is for verified members of the original detachment." Walter's pale blue eyes moved toward the memorial. A dark ceremonial cloth covered the granite. 5 narrow brass plates were visible along the bottom edge, each waiting beneath a folded flag. Walter folded the invitation once and placed it inside his jacket. "This chair will do," he said. His voice was rough with age, but steady. He wiped dust from the seat before lowering himself onto it. A cedar box rested across his knees. It was no larger than a family Bible. The brass latch had turned nearly black, and one corner of the wood carried an old crescent-shaped burn. Cole noticed it. "That box remains closed during the ceremony." Walter placed one hand over the lid. "It will remain closed until it is needed." Cole gave him a thin smile. "Nothing behind this column will be needed." He turned and walked away. His polished shoes struck the concrete in short, hard beats. Walter watched him go without anger. Then he looked toward the honor guard. 6 soldiers stood near the memorial in dark dress uniforms. White gloves, fixed eyes, shoulders set at identical angles. Captain Daniel Mercer commanded the detail. He called the rehearsal movement. 6 heels turned as one. Walter watched the spacing. He watched the rise and fall of each foot. He counted beneath his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. His thumb moved across the burned corner of the cedar box. For the first time, his expression changed. "There should only be 5, he whispered. Captain Mercer heard nothing, but he saw Walter counting. The detail reset. The youngest guard shifted half an inch to correct his alignment. Walter noticed before Mercer did. That caught the captain's attention. Most guests watched uniforms. Walter watched the spaces between them. Mercer dismissed the detail for a brief water break and crossed toward the equipment table, choosing a path that took him near the speaker column. Walter sat upright despite the heat. His dark suit was old but carefully pressed. His shoes were worn at the edges and polished at the toes. A narrow blue and silver ribbon rested on his left lapel. It was not an army decoration Mercer recognized. Emily returned with a paper cup. "It will reach 94 degrees this afternoon," she said. "Please drink." Walter accepted it with both hands. "Thank you, Miss Foster. I am still trying to find you a better seat. I can see what I came to see." Emily followed his gaze toward the covered memorial. "Did you serve with one of the men being honored?" Walter waited as a bugler tested a single low note near the parade field. The sound moved through the warm air. "All 5, he said. Emily studied him. Mercer slowed as he passed. Lieutenant Cole returned before either of them could ask another question. His eyes went directly to the ribbon on Walter's lapel. "You need to remove that." Walter looked down. The cloth was faded. One edge had frayed. Someone had repaired it by hand with 3 almost invisible stitches. "No," Walter said. Cole blinked. "This is a formal army dedication. Unrecognized insignia cannot be displayed in a way that suggests official status." "It does not suggest anything." "Then what is it?" Walter touched the ribbon with 2 fingers. "A piece of a flag." Cole waited. Walter offered no more. "Who gave it to you?" "A man who lived because 5 others did not." Emily lowered her eyes. Cole's jaw tightened. "Every person attending this ceremony has a history, Mr. Brennan. We cannot reorganize protocol around stories that have not been verified." Walter looked past him toward the 5 concealed plates. "Then verify the missing name." There is no missing name. That is the problem. Cole opened the event roster. Walter J. Brennan. Civilian guest. No public service number. No listed rank. No verified decorations. No command affiliation. He closed the binder. You will remain in this area. You will not approach the memorial or the stage. Walter raised the paper cup and took one small drink. I did not come for the stage. Good. Cole motioned to a security specialist near the service entrance. Keep this aisle clear. The specialist looked from Cole to Walter. He appeared uncomfortable, but he nodded. Cole walked away again. A gust passed beneath the pavilion. The flags outside snapped sharply. The cedar lid lifted less than an inch. The latch had not caught. Mercer saw dark metal inside. 5 identification tags. They rested in narrow velvet grooves. Beside them was a 6th groove with nothing in it. Walter closed the lid and pressed the latch into place. Cole had seen only an old box. Mercer had seen an absence preserved with care. Emily returned several minutes later with a second copy of the program. Her face had changed. Mr. Brennan, I checked the original invitation file. Walter did not look surprised. Your invitation was not generated by mistake, she said. Your name was entered personally 12 years ago. By whom? The file does not say, but it identifies you as a founding member of the 2nd Air Cavalry Rescue Detachment. Walter looked toward the memorial. Emily opened the program to the unit history. Your name is not printed here. There is no rank beside it in the archive. There is not even a service number. Some records were emptied on purpose. The answer held no bitterness. That made it heavier. Emily pointed toward the 5 names printed beneath an old photograph. You said you knew all of them. I did. Were you part of their team? Walter's hand settled over the cedar lid. 6 men left together. Emily looked at the 6 guards. Only 5 names are on the monument. Only 5 were allowed into the report. Her fingers tightened around the program. Were you the 6th man? Walter listened as the army band completed a slow phrase. Then he answered. I was the one who came back. Captain Mercer stood 12 feet away. This time, he heard every word. He approached without ceremony. Mr. Brennan, may I ask what is inside the box? Walter studied the captain's face. Mercer did not look impatient. He did not look entertained. He looked concerned. Names, Walter said. Before Mercer could respond, Cole stepped between them. We are not reopening this issue. Emily held up the archive page. Lieutenant, his invitation is valid. His presence may be valid. His claim is not. Walter kept his eyes on the covered stone. Cole continued. The memorial was reviewed by historians, legal officers, and installation command. 5 names were approved. We will not change a nationally broadcast ceremony because one guest remembers the mission differently. Memory did not remove my name, Walter said. Cole gave a short breath. So the Army record is wrong, and only you know the truth. Walter finally looked at him. No, his eyes moved toward the stage curtain. One other man knows. Behind that curtain, General Robert Callahan waited to deliver the dedication address. 4 silver stars rested on each shoulder of his dress uniform. An aide stood beside him, reviewing the final order of events. Callahan was no longer listening. Through a narrow opening in the curtain, he could see the rear of the pavilion. A speaker column, an isolated chair, an old man's hand resting on the burned corner of a cedar box. Callahan took one step closer. The color left his face. He knew that burn. He had smelled the wood scorching 58 years earlier when the box had been pulled from the wreckage of a field radio station. Walter did not see the general. Cole did. He mistook Callahan's movement for impatience. We begin in 12 minutes, Cole said. Security will inspect the box now. It passed inspection at the entrance, Walter replied. Then a second inspection should not concern you. Mercer lowered his voice. Lieutenant, there is no reason to turn this into a spectacle. The spectacle begins if an unidentified object reaches the memorial. Walter looked at the security specialist, then at Mercer. You may look, he said. No one handles anything without asking. Cole nodded. Walter opened the latch. The click was almost lost beneath the band. The smell of cedar rose into the hot air. 5 identification tags lay against faded blue velvet. Each chain had been cleaned, coiled, and placed inside its own fitted groove. A 6th groove remained empty. Beside the tags rested a length of faded parachute cord, a bent medical insignia, the blue and silver ribbons matching cloth, and 2 black and white photographs. Walter lifted the first photograph. 6 young soldiers stood in front of a utility helicopter. Their uniforms were stained from field work. Their faces were thin. None of them smiled for the camera, but each man rested one hand on the shoulder of the next. Walter was at the far left. On the back, written in faded pencil, were 5 words. 1 formation. 6 men. Always. Emily looked at the 5 tags. Are these theirs? Walter nodded once. He lifted the second photograph. The same 6 soldiers stood near the helicopter, but a 7th man appeared in the background. He wore a flight suit and held a map against one leg. He was young, narrow-faced, and without stars. Cole leaned closer. That is General Callahan. Before the stars, Walter said. A microphone on stage cracked with static. Walter's eyes lost focus. The pavilion disappeared. The static became a field radio breaking apart beneath rain. He was 26 again. Staff Sergeant Walter Brennan knelt beside a damaged helicopter in a valley that did not exist on any public map. The air smelled of wet earth, hydraulic fluid, and burned wiring. Low clouds pressed against the ridgeline. 5 members of his rescue detachment held a loose defensive line around the aircraft. Sergeant Thomas Keene watched the eastern slope. Specialist Miguel Ortiz worked over the radio. Corporal Samuel Bell secured the medical packs. Specialist Harold Dorsey checked the tree line. Crew Chief Franklin Price stood beside the damaged engine, one hand pressed against the same cedar box now resting on Walter's knees. The 6th member was Walter. The wounded aviator near the landing skid was First Lieutenant Robert Callahan. Callahan was not part of the detachment. He was the man they had crossed the valley to retrieve. The radio burst to life. Recovery 6, withdraw immediately. Mission compromised. Extract priority personnel only. Walter held the handset. Negative. 6 members remain on the ground. The voice returned. Operational secrecy takes priority. Move Lieutenant Callahan to the northern ridge. Leave equipment and personnel unable to travel. Walter looked at his men. No one asked what the order meant. They understood. The mission had crossed a boundary Washington would never acknowledge. If the site was discovered, the easiest report would be one with fewer names. Callahan tried to stand. His right leg failed beneath him. You cannot move everyone, he said. Walter tied the faded parachute cord around Callahan's harness. Then I will make more trips. The radio repeated the withdrawal order. Walter removed the headset and placed it on the wet ground. We go together, he said. He pulled Callahan toward the northern ridge. The distance was less than 200 yards. In rain and mud, it felt like 2 miles. Callahan tried to help, but every step drove pain through his leg. Walter moved slowly, keeping one arm under the younger officer's shoulder. At the ridge, he lowered Callahan behind a shelf of stone. Stay here. Callahan grabbed his sleeve. They ordered you out. They did not order me to forget my men. Walter returned to the helicopter. The first position was empty. Thomas Keene had moved farther east to draw attention away from the ridge. Walter found Keene's identification tag hanging from a broken branch. Wrapped around it was a strip of map paper. On the paper, Keene had written 2 words. Keep moving. Walter placed the tag inside the cedar box. He returned to the ridge. Then he went back again. Miguel Ortiz remained beside the field radio, repeating false coordinates so search teams would move away from Callahan's position. When Walter reached him, the radio was silent. Ortiz's identification tag rested on the handset. Walter took it. The rain grew harder. He returned a 3rd time. Samuel Bell had left his medical insignia beneath a rock to mark a safe path through the mud. The metal had been bent almost in half. Walter found Bell's tag beside it. He took both. On the 4th trip, Walter found Harold Dorsey's tag tied to a length of cord at the edge of the tree line. Dorsey had used the cord to guide Walter through the darkness during dozens of night recoveries. Now it guided Walter to an empty position. The 5th trip took him back to the helicopter. Franklin Price was still there. The crew chief sat against the landing skid, one hand resting on the burned cedar box. The damaged radio battery had scorched the corner, but the lid remained intact. Price placed his identification tag inside. 4 others were already there. Walter crouched in front of him. Come with me. Price shook his head. The rotor above them turned once in the wind, then stopped. They will erase this place, Price said. I know. They will erase us with it. Walter gripped his shoulder. No, Price pushed the box into Walter's hands. Do not let us disappear. Those were the last words Walter heard from him. Walter made the sixth and final crossing with the cedar box held against his chest. He reached Callahan before sunrise. Behind them, the valley disappeared into rain and low cloud. The recovery report filed 2 days later contained 4 lines. Aircraft lost. 5 detachment personnel unaccounted for. 1 aviator recovered under classified circumstances. Recovery specialist omitted for operational security. Walter Brennan's name did not appear. Neither did the 6-man detachment. Callahan protested as soon as he could stand. The answer remained the same. No public acknowledgement. No unit citation. No corrected report. The operation had never officially occurred. Walter returned to ordinary duty under another unit designation. He repaired vehicles, trained younger soldiers, and retired without speaking about the valley. He never requested a medal. 5 men could not make the same request. Years later, Callahan found him working in a maintenance building at Fort Halstead. By then, Callahan wore a colonel's insignia. He carried a strip of blue and silver cloth. It had been cut from the lining of the detachment's original flag before the unit records were sealed. Callahan pinned it to Walter's work shirt. "It is not authorized," he said. Walter looked down at it. "Neither were we." Callahan almost smiled. Then his face tightened. "One day, the record will open." Walter said nothing. Callahan placed one hand over the cedar box. "One day, all 6 names will stand together." Walter looked at him. "Promise." "I promise." The microphone static ended. The pavilion returned. Walter stood beside the open box with one hand resting on Franklin Price's tag. Mercer's voice was quiet. "You crossed that valley 6 times. Once for Lieutenant Callahan," Walter said. 5 times for my men." Cole stared at the photograph. Some of the certainty had left his face. If the mission existed, documentation must exist. It does. Where? Under a unit name that was dissolved before sunrise. Behind the curtain, General Callahan closed one hand around the edge of the podium. He had spent most of his career trying to free that record. 12 years earlier, when the first declassification petition appeared close to approval, he had written one instruction into the ceremony binder. If Walter Brennan attends, Formation 6 supersedes all ceremonial plans. Callahan had not known whether Walter would live long enough to see it used. Walter closed the cedar box. "I did not come here to be honored," he said. "I came because 5 men were about to be remembered without the truth that held them together." Mercer returned to the honor guard staging table. The ceremonial binder lay open beside the formation diagram. He turned past the approved sequence and found a page printed on heavier paper. At the top were 2 words, Formation 6. Beneath them was Callahan's handwritten instruction and signature. The order was dated 12 years earlier. Cole appeared at Mercer's shoulder. "We begin in 5 minutes." Mercer turned the page toward him. "Did you know about this?" Cole read it. "It is not part of today's approved sequence. It is signed by General Callahan. It is 12 years old. It has no expiration date." Cole lowered his voice. "The press feed is live. There are hundreds of guests seated. We cannot alter the ceremony because an elderly man brought a box and told us a classified story." Mercer closed the binder. "I am not altering it because of a story. I am following a standing order." He called the general's aide. The answer came after 1 ring. "Go ahead. This is Captain Mercer. Walter Brennan is present." The cedar box contains 5 identification tags and 6 fitted spaces. I located the Formation 6 instruction. Silence filled the line. Then the aide spoke. "Confirm the recognition phrase." Mercer crossed back to Walter. "Mr. Brennan, I need to ask you one question. What did Franklin Price say at the aircraft?" Walter's thumb moved over the burned corner. "Do not let us disappear." Mercer raised the phone. "Identity confirmed." The aide's reply came immediately. "Prepare Formation 6. Do not move until the general gives the command." Cole had followed close enough to hear. His face tightened, not with disbelief now, but with fear of losing control of the schedule. "The presentation of colors begins in 90 seconds. Then we wait for the general. The published program cannot wait." "The published program honors 5 men," Mercer said. "The standing order honors the truth." Cole looked toward the stage. The master of ceremonies was already approaching the podium. The national broadcast light turned red. Cole made a decision. He gave the signal to begin. The announcer's voice filled the pavilion. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the presentation of colors." The honor guard moved into the public formation. 6 sets of heels struck the concrete. Walter listened from behind the speaker column. The movement was flawless. It was also wrong. The colors were posted. The national anthem ended. The guests sat beneath the shade. Walter remained alone in the heat. Emily stood near the aisle, holding the archive page against her chest. Mercer kept his detail ready. Cole watched the schedule. The announcer began reading the history of the 2nd Air Cavalry Rescue Detachment. The language was polished. The dates were accurate. The story was incomplete. The dark cloth fell from the memorial. 5 brass names caught the sunlight. Thomas Keene. A drum sounded once. Miguel Ortiz. A second beat. Samuel Bell. Another beat. Harold Dorsey. Franklin Price. The final drumbeat faded. Walter opened the cedar box. His hand trembled for the first time that afternoon. Not when Cole had insulted him. Not when security had approached. Only now, as 5 names traveled across the field without the 6th man who had carried them home. The announcer closed the list. Walter waited through the silence. He gave the ceremony one final chance to remember. It did not. He placed both hands on the chair and rose. The cedar box rested against his chest. Cole saw him. Mr. Brennan remained seated. Walter stepped around the speaker column. The security specialist approached with visible reluctance. Emily moved into the aisle. Lieutenant, General Callahan knows who he is. The general is about to speak, Cole said. This disruption ends now. The specialist reached Walter and stopped beside him. He did not take Walter's arm. Walter looked toward the curtain. He spoke in the same voice he had used in the valley 58 years earlier. Robert, you promised 6. The podium microphone caught the words. They traveled through every speaker beneath the pavilion. Behind the curtain, General Callahan froze. The announcer turned. The audience fell silent. Cole's face lost its color. Callahan stepped onto the stage before his introduction. 4 silver stars crossed into the sunlight. He carried no prepared speech. His eyes moved past the donors, past the retired officers, past the reserved rows. They stopped on Walter Brennan, standing beside the worst seat in the pavilion with the cedar box held against his heart. For several seconds, the general said nothing. The flags outside snapped in the wind. Callahan turned toward Mercer. Correct the formation. Mercer faced the honor guard. His command struck the pavilion like a bell. Honor guard. Brennan formation. 6 soldiers moved at once. Their heels turned in one hard beat. The formation facing the monument broke apart. The guards marched away from the stage. They passed the generals. They passed the donors. They passed every shaded seat marked reserved. They advanced toward the speaker column. Every head followed them. The place selected to hide Walter became the center of the ceremony. The 6 guards divided into 2 lines, creating a corridor from the folding chair to the memorial. Mercer stopped before Walter and saluted. Mr. Brennan, the formation is ready. Walter returned the salute slowly. Then he opened the cedar box. Thomas Keene's tag went to the 1st guard. Miguel Ortiz's to the 2nd. Samuel Bell's to the 3rd. Harold Dorsey's to the 4th. Franklin Price's to the 5th. The 5 guards turned and took their places before the 5 brass names. The 6th guard remained in front of Walter. His white-gloved hands were empty. Walter looked at those empty hands. For 58 years, that had been his place in the official record. An empty space. General Callahan left the stage and walked down the center aisle alone. No aide followed him. No announcement introduced him. When he reached Walter, he stopped at attention. The 2 men looked at one another across 58 years. Callahan's voice was barely above a whisper. I am sorry it took this long. Walter looked toward the 5 guards holding the tags. They waited longer. Callahan raised his hand. A 4-star general saluted the forgotten staff sergeant. Walter returned it. The pavilion rose without being told. Retired officers stood. Active duty soldiers stood. Civilians stood. Emily covered her mouth with one hand. Cole remained beside the aisle, the event roster hanging uselessly at his side. Callahan faced the audience. The official history you heard today was incomplete. He held up a sealed document bearing the Army insignia. At 9 o'clock this morning, the final restriction on Operation Lantern Ridge was lifted. The corrected report identifies a 6-man rescue detachment. He turned toward the 5 guards. 5 members did not return. Then he faced Walter. One did. The general's voice tightened. The wounded aviator staff sergeant Walter Brennan carried across that ridge was me. No one moved. Callahan continued. He was ordered to withdraw with one priority survivor. Instead, he crossed the valley 6 times. Once to carry me out, 5 times to recover the identities and final messages of his men. He placed one hand on the cedar box. The government protected a secret by removing his name. Today, that name returns. Callahan opened the document. By order of the Department of the Army, the historical record of the 2nd Air Cavalry Rescue Detachment is corrected to include Staff Sergeant Walter J. Brennan as its founding rescue specialist and sole surviving member. The 6th Guard stepped back. A space opened beside the 5 men represented before the memorial. Callahan looked at Walter. "Take your place." Walter did not move immediately. His eyes went from one identification tag to the next. Then he stepped forward. He stood in the 6th position. The crowd remained silent. The silence was not empty now. It was respect. Callahan turned toward Cole. The lieutenant stood rigidly. "Lieutenant," the general said, "procedure protects a ceremony. Judgment protects its meaning." Cole swallowed. "Yes, sir." "You had an invitation bearing the words founding member." "Yes, sir." "You saw an incomplete record and assumed the man was the error." Cole lowered his eyes. "Yes, sir." Callahan did not raise his voice. "Do not make that mistake again." "No, sir." Cole walked to Walter. For the first time, he did not carry the binder like a shield. He stopped at attention. "Mr. Brennan, I was wrong. I treated the record as more important than the man standing in front of me." Walter looked at him for a long moment. Then he glanced toward the young soldiers in the honor guard. "Remember the next man before a general has to tell you." Cole nodded. "Yes, sir." The bugler raised his instrument. Before the first note, Callahan offered Walter the chair reserved for him on the stage. Walter shook his head. "My men are here." He remained in the 6th position. The first note of taps moved across the parade field. Walter's hand rested at his side. It trembled once. Franklin Price's identification chain shifted softly in the white gloves of the 5th Guard. Metal touched metal. A small sound. Almost nothing. Walter heard it. He closed his eyes. For one breath, he stood again beneath rain and low clouds. Thomas Keene was watching the eastern slope. Miguel Ortiz was bent over the radio. Samuel Bell held the medical pack. Harold Dorsey tied cord between 2 trees. Franklin Price sat beside the helicopter with one hand on a burned cedar box. 6 men. One formation. Always. When taps ended, Walter opened his eyes. Callahan stood beside him. The general spoke quietly. "The 6th plate will be installed when the engraver finishes the corrected inscription." Walter looked at the smooth section of granite. "Do not put my decorations on it." Callahan nodded. "What should it say?" Walter looked at the 5 names. He brought their names home. 3 months later, Walter returned to Fort Halstead. There were no television cameras, no donors, no band. Only Emily Foster, Captain Mercer, Lieutenant Cole, General Callahan, and 6 members of the honor guard. A new brass plate rested on the smooth section of granite. Walter J. Brennan, Staff Sergeant, founding member. He brought their names home. Cole had arranged the chairs that morning. Walter's chair stood in the front row. He did not sit in it. He carried the cedar box to the memorial and opened it beneath the 6 names. The 5 identification tags remained inside. The 6th groove was still empty. Emily noticed. Should something be placed there now? Walter shook his head. That space was never for an object. He touched his own name on the brass plate. It was waiting for the truth. Callahan stood beside him. The 2 old men looked at the 6 names as morning light moved across the stone. No one saluted first. No one needed to. Honor does not always sit in the front row. Sometimes it waits behind a column, holding the names of the forgotten, until the truth turns the whole formation around.